Coming up in our newscast tonight. The two Koreas are set to achieve another milestone in terms of joint projects. During a meeting in their joint liaison office, Seoul and Pyongyang agreed to coordinate efforts in the aviation sector, meaning direct flight routes across the border could be opened. A UN panel adopts a resolution on North Korea's violations of human rights, urging the regime to shut all political prison camps and release prisoners. The resolution also welcomes diplomatic efforts, underscoring the importance of engagement in improving human rights. South Korea's fine dust level spikes to concerning levels due to pollutants blown in from China. An ultra-fine dust warning is issued in the nation, meaning restrictions on select vehicles and outdoor construction. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Tran. Seoul and Pyongyang will work together in the aviation sector. This agreement was reached when delegations from both sides met this morning at the joint liaison office. During the session, they touched on various issues at stake on the matter, such as opening a direct air route across the border. Cha Sang-mi starts us off with this welcome step forward in inter-Korean cooperation.
Confidence-building measures continue on the Korean peninsula as South and North follow through on the agreements made at their Panmunjom summit. But this is the first time for them to work together in aviation, and new flight routes could be on the way too. The agreement came in a meeting on Friday at the joint liaison office in the North's border town of Kaesong. According to Seoul's transport ministry, the North has proposed opening direct international flights between the two Koreas on the east and west coasts. To that, the South Korean delegation said it's something that should continue to be discussed in talks between the two sides' aviation authorities. Both Seoul and Pyongyang said the meeting was significant as the first one to deal with aviation, following other talks about railways, roads, and forestry. Each side sent 5 delegates, Seoul's led by Son Myung-soo, a senior official from the Transport Ministry, and the North's by the Deputy Director General of the regime's Aviation Administration, Lee Young-sun. The North first reached out to propose the meeting and Seoul agreed to it. The two Koreas had agreed at a summit in 2007 to run tours to Baekdusan Mountain in the north and to renovate the North's old airports, but the plan fell through when South Korea got a new president. Earlier this year, Pyongyang asked the International Civil Aviation Organization to establish a new flight route that would pass through North and South Korean airspace. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
North Korea is more than willing than ever to denuclearize, but to encourage that an end to the Korean War must be declared. That's what Seoul's Unification Minister thinks when it comes to North Korea's denuclearization. He spoke at a forum in Washington on Thursday.
If regime security or any other benefit in return is guaranteed, Kim Jong-un has a much stronger willingness than previous leaders to earn those instead by giving up nuclear weapons.
Cho Myung-gyun also highlighted there needs to be a clear reason for the regime to denuclearize, like declaring an end to the Korean War, which, according to him, is only a political declaration. The minister stressed sanctions will remain in place until there's real progress made on denuclearization, and Seoul has made it clear to Pyongyang that inter-Korean economic cooperation can only proceed then. Regarding North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to the South, promised at the September summit, Cho pointed out it can happen within this year and has to happen as the two Koreas agreed to it. South Korea's nuclear envoy Lee Do-hun will be visiting the U.S. next Monday through Wednesday to meet with his counterpart Stephen Biegun to talk about issues on the Korean peninsula and denuclearization. This time, they'll be fine-tuning the details of a new working group on the regime announced after their last meeting in Seoul 3 weeks ago. The working group will focus on cooperation in diplomacy, denuclearization efforts, the implementation of UN sanctions, and ways in which the two Koreas can work together within the sanctions. According to a senior South Korean official, the working group's first meeting might take place while Lee is there this next week. Pyongyang's Korean Central News Agency reported on Friday that the regime has successfully tested a new high-tech weapon under the supervision of its leader Kim Jong-un. According to a South Korean military source, the newly tested weapon has not been identified yet. But the source said that it's believed to have been developed over a long period of time. The source pointed out the North's report only mentions it tested a new weapon, so whether or not it was some kind of rockets cannot yet be determined. But investigations are underway. Pyongyang plans to deport an American who illegally entered the regime last month. According to the North Korean Central News Agency, the U.S. citizen identified as Bruce Lawrence has been detained in the communist state since he was caught on October 16th after crossing the border with China. The state media in the North claims he confessed to entering the Hermit Kingdom under the direction of the CIA. However, they did not specify when Mr. Lawrence will be deported. It's the first time this information has surfaced. Some speculate the fairly early deportation suggests Pyongyang is willing to get the stalled talks with Washington back on track. Along with denuclearization, human rights is another long-standing issue in North Korea that the international community has been working to resolve. The UN is showing a united front condemning such violations by Pyongyang. Lee Jong-un gets us up to speed with the developments.
The UN Committee on Human Rights has adopted a resolution slamming North Korea's long-standing and ongoing systematic, widespread and gross violations of human rights. The committee approved the resolution by consensus without a vote on Thursday. The resolution is expected to pass the General Assembly in December for the 14th straight year. It lists grave human rights violations by North Korea, including torture, rape, public executions, and the continuing impunity for such abuses. It strongly urged the regime to respect human rights by shutting all political prison camps and releasing the prisoners. While North Korea has not been taking any measures to comply, the Commission also encouraged the UN Security Council to take appropriate measures to ensure accountability. These include referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court and further sanctions targeting those who appear to be most responsible for human rights violations, an apparent reference to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But the resolution also welcomes diplomatic efforts with North Korea. It mentions the importance of engagement in improving human rights and the resumption of family reunions for those separated by the Korean War. The reunion took place in August for the first time in almost 3 years, and the report also welcomed the two Koreas' promise to fundamentally solve the issue, as promised in the third Inter-Korean Summit in September. However, North Korea's UN mission stormed out of the meeting, saying it resolutely and totally rejects the resolution. It said the North will strongly act against pressure from hostile forces that try to disgrace North Korea's image. South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry says it backs the consensus to adopt the resolution as part of its efforts to improve North Korea's human rights issues through cooperation with the international community. The draft was written by the EU and Japan and co-sponsored by 61 member states. 이지원, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has wrapped up his busy schedule in Singapore. He is now in Papua New Guinea, the host nation of this year's APEC Summit. Shin Se-min outlines what's ahead for this South Korean leader.
After knocking out two important summits with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the ASEAN meetings in Singapore, President Moon Jae-in is in the second and final stop of his Asia tour, Papua New Guinea. At the Asia-Pacific Summit, held in one of the poorest APEC member nations, President Moon will press other APEC leaders to embrace inclusive economic policies. He's expected to talk about how economic integration through free trade and investment, as well as the benefits of the digital revolution, can be evenly distributed to the region's economies. The South Korean leader will also pitch the creation of a joint APEC Digital Innovation Fund that will be used to boost the region's digital capabilities. On the diplomacy with North Korea, President Moon pressed on the need to ease sanctions on the regime to motivate Pyongyang to speed up the denuclearization process. From his conversation with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, President Moon said relations between the Koreas and between North Korea and the U.S. should move forward in tandem. President Moon will also discuss issues of common interest with Chinese President Xi Jinping when they meet in Papua New Guinea, with a strong focus on North Korea and Seoul-Beijing economic relations. Once he's done that, President Moon will have met with 3 of the 4 major players in the region. The only leader he isn't due to meet this week is Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. There, in the high-stakes summit of President Moon Jae-in's 6-day trip with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Papua New Guinea. And there, the South Korean leader will ask for Beijing's support in speeding up North Korea's denuclearization process. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Singapore.
South Korea is expected to announce this month that it's disbanding a controversial organization funded by Japan for the victims of Japan's past sexual enslavement of Korean women. This is according to senior officials at Seoul's foreign ministry, who said Friday that the legislative work to disband the so-called Reconciliation and Healing Foundation is likely to take 6 months to a year. The officials said the South Korean government will also continue discussions about what to do with the roughly $8.7 million in Japanese funding. The foundation is the result of a 2015 agreement between Seoul and Tokyo to compensate Korean women sexually enslaved by the Japanese military during World War II. But the foundation never actually started running since many surviving victims rejected the agreement as a failure by Japan to take full legal responsibility. A local civic group promoting peace in Asia-Pacific region held a conference on the forced mobilization of Koreans during Japan's colonial rule. It brought together 300 participants from 10 Asia-Pacific countries. A senior official from Pyongyang harshly condemned Tokyo's war crimes and called for action. Jong-un has the highlights from that session.
A nation that forgets its past has no future. That was a swipe against Japan by Lee Jong-hyuk, a senior North Korean official who spoke at an international conference held in South Korea on Friday. The conference, held in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do Province, was on peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region, and it centered around Japan's forced mobilization of Koreans during its colonial rule of the peninsula in the first half of the 20th century. Ri pointed out that Japan forcibly mobilized 8.4 million Koreans as soldiers, laborers, and some 200,000 women as sex slaves. In that process, many were cruelly massacred. Ri called for Tokyo to take sincere steps.
First, the Japanese government should thoroughly investigate and reveal the entire truth about the drafting of Koreans. Second, Japan should admit its national responsibility and give an official apology and sufficient compensation to all the victims and their families. Third, Japan should find all the remains of the victims and take steps to return them to their home country.
Japan claims that the issue was resolved through the Korea-Japan Treaty in 1965. Back then, Japan paid South Korea $300 million in compensation for its colonial rule without a formal apology to the victims. Japan's former Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama, who took part in Friday's event, highlighted that the treaty does not resolve the issue.
The historical fact that Japan colonized Korea and waged a war should be taken seriously, and I believe this issue is not resolved by the Korea-Japan Treaty. Japan has an unlimited responsibility for this and should be apologizing until the victims feel they don't need any more apologies.
The forum ended with a joint resolution denouncing Japan's drafting of Koreans and people from other Asia-Pacific countries as a war crime. The participating countries promised to coordinate in revealing the truth of Japan's war crimes and in finding the remains of the victims. Jong-un, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un expressed his gratitude to President Moon Jae-in for the 200 tons of Jeju tangerines sent to the north this week. The North Korean Central News Agency described the fruits as a significant gift by President Moon that's linked to the warm hearts of South Koreans. According to the report by the regime's state-run media, Kim ordered the tangerines to be delivered to students and workers in Pyongyang. South Korea sent the tangerines to the north via military transport aircraft as a return gift to Pyongyang for the 2 tons of pine mushrooms it presented to Seoul after the September Inter-Korean Summit. One of the biggest public health threats in North Korea is tuberculosis. The Eugene Bell Foundation, an NGO that works closely with Pyongyang on treating TB, called for Seoul's help after its latest visit to the regime. Kan Young-woo has the full story.
The Eugene Bell Foundation, a U.S.-based humanitarian aid group that has long provided medical assistance to North Korea, has called for South Korea's proactive efforts to fight tuberculosis in the north. At a press conference in Seoul on Friday, the chairman of the non-governmental organization, Stephen Linton, said that international organizations are not in a hurry to provide medical assistance to the north because the inter-Korean relationship has gotten better in the recent months, and that they now expect South Korea to take responsibility in helping out its neighbor.
According to our research, the South Korean government has not made any significant move towards providing medical assistance to the north. Previously, non-governmental organizations used to assume the leadership in tackling the tuberculosis crisis in North Korea, but it's time for South Korea to take the wheel.
In particular, Linton called for the South Korean government to push for sanctions exemptions for aid groups delivering supplies and medicine to treat North Korean patients. As the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria stopped providing support to North Korea in June, its stock of medicine in the north is expected to run out by early 2020. Without further help, the tuberculosis crisis in the north will become even more severe. According to the World Health Organization, some 100,000 cases of tuberculosis were reported in North Korea in 2017, and about 16,000 people died from the virus. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Broadcast media has significant influence over society, be it in times of war or peace. Not too long ago, the two Koreas used loudspeakers to wage psychological warfare on one another. And now broadcasting is seen as a crucial tool to help enhance the peaceful mood on the peninsula. Woo Se-young spoke to some experts about the possibilities of cross-border media cooperation.
Setting the scene for inter-Korean peace and eventually unification is the broad agenda at hand at a forum held in southern Seoul on Thursday, where experts discussed how to advance South-North cooperation on broadcasting communications.
After more than 70 years of separation, there are many clashing points between the cultures of the two Koreas. The same goes with respective populations. Broadcast exchanges would help narrow the gap and instill a positive cycle of mutual understanding, and also bringing chances to create not only societal and cultural benefits, but also economic value as the industry expands.
Under the country's Act on Broadcast Communications Development, South Korea aims to enhance mutual exchanges and cooperation with the North. Such efforts peaked in the early to mid-noughties, following the first Inter-Korean Summit in 2000. A number of South and North Korean broadcast media co-produced documentaries on nature and even a drama series in 2007. However, efforts for collaboration and regular meetings between broadcasters subsided after inter-Korean relations turned frosty during the previous conservative administrations in the South. With the two Koreas reviving their peace agenda this year, broadcasters and carriers in Seoul are looking to reconnect and explore new opportunities in the North. The possibilities range from cooperating on broadcast systems and platforms to exchanging and creating popular music and video content. However, to pave the way for long-term cooperation, experts say the North's outdated infrastructure first needs to be upgraded.
There is a mobile network limited to North Korean citizens. The international community who work and travel there, it's very restrictive, although one can get access to making international calls and email and so on. It's extremely expensive to do so. So there's definitely opportunities to provide and work with them to create a better infrastructure and better use of technology to help sort of drive a connected and smart society there.
Broadcasting authorities in Seoul hope to meet with their Pyongyang counterparts in the near future, as early as next year, to resume long-stalled talks on building sustainable cooperation between the two sides. Woo Se-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's Navy launched its maiden cadet training vessel today. A grand ceremony was held for the Hansan-do today in Ulsan, attended by some big names in the nation's military. Park Jo-won gets us better acquainted with this brand new ship.
The South Korean Navy held a launching ceremony Friday afternoon for its very first training ship, the Hansando. The ceremony at the shipyard of Hyundai Heavy Industries in the city of Ulsan was attended by Admiral Shim Seung-sup, the nation's chief of naval operations and the chair of Parliament's National Defense Committee, An Gyu-baek. Work on the ship began back in 2013 with the primary purpose of training cadets and officers. The Hansando weighs 4,500 tons and is 142 meters long. It can sail more than 12,000 kilometers or 7,000 miles at a maximum speed of 24 knots or around 44 kilometers an hour. It has berths for a crew of more than 400, as well as large lecture halls with some 200 seats. The ship is also equipped with a deck and hangar for amphibious helicopters, plus guns and an anti-missile decoy system for use in an emergency. It has 3 operating rooms for medics, so it can be used to receive and treat casualties if needed. According to the Navy, the Hansando is scheduled to be deployed from early 2021 for actual operations. The ship's name comes from the southern island of Hansando, where the 16th century Korean naval hero Admiral Lee Sun-shin won historic battles against the Japanese fleet during the Imjin War. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Latest data shows about 55% of the nation's households own at least one house. In other words, more than 4 out of 10 do not own a place to live. Our Ko Ryuni help us look beyond the digits.
Data released by Statistics Korea on Friday shows that more than 44% of South Korean households do not own their homes. As of November 1, 2017, the home ownership rate of households stood at 55.9%, which marks a 0.4 percentage point increase from the previous year. Breaking it down by city, households in Seoul had the lowest home ownership rate of just 49.2%. The report also showed a wide difference in house prices. Based on the price as of January 1st this year, the average price in the bottom 10% of house prices was around $22,000. And the average in the top 10% was around $719,000, which is more than 32 times that of the bottom 10%. An economic expert says this is a reflection of the stark differences in living conditions across the nation's housing market.
Polarization of housing prices means a polarization of residential environments. To solve this issue, the South Korean government has been working to improve the living conditions or increase the housing supply in areas where lower-priced houses are located. However, I'm not sure if this has been that effective.
Meanwhile, to ease the housing problem, the South Korean government announced last August it would build 300,000 extra homes to curb soaring house prices. And in September, it revealed the specific housing sites where 35,000 of these homes would be built. Ko Ryuni, Arirang News.
Seoul is under a blanket of fine dust today, prompting the government to take measures to prevent vehicles or construction work and advise people to wear masks or try and stay indoors if possible. According to our Seobobin, air quality in the nation has gotten a whole lot worse, mainly due to pollution blowing from China.
South Korea is under an ultra-fine dust warning on Friday due to the smog coming from Beijing and neighboring parts of China caused by pollution from coal heating and heavy emissions. When an ultra-fine dust warning is issued, outdoor construction is restricted and vehicles causing heavy pollution are prohibited. Due to its smaller particle size, ultra-fine dust is more harmful to the respiratory system than fine dust. So, children, the elderly, and those with respiratory diseases have been advised to stay indoors and wear face masks when going outside. But the ultra-fine dust isn't expected to last long. Clear weather is forecast for the weekend as the fine dust is blown southeast by the cold air coming from the northwest overnight. However, the winds will get stronger and the early winter cold is expected to arrive over the weekend. Seobobin, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, weather conditions recently haven't been the most inviting, but I hear the forecast is about to change.
That's right, Daniel. And even now, most of the country is blanketed with thick layer of ultrafine dust. But a cold front is soon to change that, bringing back much needed clear air. And it's going to be a cloudy day for Saturday in Korea, with Beijing and Tokyo also forecast to feature similar conditions. And the wind will clear away the dust, but it will also bring down the mercury overnight. Seoul and Daejeon wakes up to 1 degree Celsius. Chuncheon goes into negative territory at -1 degrees, while Busan and Jeju remains milder. And the daily highs aren't going to be too different from today. Seoul topping out to 11 degrees tomorrow, and Daegu and Gyeongju hitting up to 15 and 16 degrees respectively. Jeju will see some precipitation over on Sunday through Monday, and next week temperatures will plunge further, hovering around freezing point in the mornings. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we have to wrap things up. Thanks for staying with us as always, and have a wonderful weekend.